This presentation is brought to you by the Beljanski Foundation. Over 50 years of research towards curing cancer the natural way.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for attending. I want to tell you as much as I can in the 20 minutes that we have to speak. Give you a little bit of a background on myself. My history was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, to a very happy Italian family. I grew up like a regular kid in the neighborhood, playing on the street and having a good time. Also had a bit of a background in my church. I was a lector as a child. I was in the choir. I was an usher when I was in my teens. So I was really involved with my church as a kid too, and I had a good experience. At the age of 17, something very unusual happened. I began to have feelings of anxiety, depression, overwhelmedness, not knowing why I was thinking these terrible thoughts, and something was going on that I couldn't put my finger on. Nor could my parents, because they tried taking me to the local doctors and nobody could figure out what to do with me. And it turned out that they didn't know what to do with me, so I ended up in St. Vincent's Medical Facility in Lower Manhattan. I was put there for 6 weeks. I was kept under lock and key. I couldn't leave, and I was basically institutionalized. I was labeled a chronic manic depressive with bipolar disorder. I was medicated with Haldol, Tegretol, Thorazine, and lithium. That was my cocktail. And I did that for about 2 years. I was finally let out on Columbus Day of 1981. I remember the day very vividly. But the problem was I was just as worse off as when I went in there, but I just wanted to get out of there because it was horrible being locked away in there. I should have not been put in. St. Vincent's ran a program that was quite unique where they actually put in children with adults. So on my ward were grown people with severe emotional illness that I was sitting with every day, and I was only 17 years old. So as it turns out, trying to be a good patient, I took all the medications that were prescribed for about 2 years. And 2 years into it, I was 100 pounds heavier. I was more depressed than ever before. And I was at a point that I was really considering what it would be like if I were not here anymore. I would not say that I wanted to kill myself, but I was pretty damn close because I just thought, what would it be like if I didn't have to deal with this anymore? I was fantasizing about not existing. So I don't know if you'd call that suicide or not, but I definitely didn't want to be here. So here's what occurred to me. I had an epiphany on my 19th year of life. I got really angry with God. And I went out in my backyard in Brooklyn, and I had a good talk with God that day. And I said, listen, you know, you made me this smart guy. I had everything going for me as a young man, and then you took it away from me. And here I am in hell at the age of 19, not knowing who I am, where I'm going, and I'm not doing what you want me to do on this. I quit. So I said, if this is the life you want for me, I'm not taking it. So on a moment's notice, I took the drugs, all 4 of them that I was taking, and I poured them down the drain in the rain, and I swore to God that day that I would never take another prescribed medical drug, and that was about 36 years ago, and I have not taken a prescribed drug since that day. Now, that was one of the worst and hardest days of my life, but it was also one of the best days of my life because I shifted. You know, there comes a point in our lives where we have a life-changing experience. We've all experienced this, where something cataclysmic happened, and either we sank or we swam. Well, I swam. I pulled myself up. I dusted myself off. I took the drugs out of my system in one day, which is very challenging to do, but I replaced the negatives of the drugs with diet, attitude, exercise, and I surrounded myself with just positive, spiritually uplifting things, and I saved my own life. So that led me into chiropractic college in my early 20s. I went back to school. I got myself squared up, became a chiropractor in my late 20s. During that time, I had met my wife, who I was dating in my early 20s, and she was with me while I was going through school. I also lost my father to cancer in my second year of chiropractic college. So a lot of things happened that really forced me to have these self-awarenesses come to me that caused me to grow as a human being. Once I lost my father, a very interesting thing happened to me. When I believed in that stage of my life that God does not take anything away without giving you something back. So on the day of my father's funeral, when I was standing in front of his casket praying to God and to my father to tell me what the lesson was I was supposed to learn from losing my father, it did come to me. And through prayer and just waiting for it to come to me, that answer came to me. And the answer was basically, in a nutshell, that there are no rules to life, and that we were put here to grow as spiritual beings in meat suits that we occupy, and that we have to continue to grow on the path that is righteous and good for us, and that my path may be different from your path, but it's my responsibility to live my life, my rules, my way, just as it is your responsibility to live your best life under your best rules, under your best way. And I put that process into my life while I was in the middle of school, and it changed my life. I no longer had fear of failure. I no longer cared what people thought about me, because I've always been a little bit of a unique thinker. I've always been, so to speak, out of the box. I don't seem to conform to what everybody says I should do. And that could be a very good thing and a very uplifting thing when you're doing what we're doing. We're looking for answers, right? We're trying to figure out how to help ourselves. So with that being said, I moved along in my career. I graduated from chiropractic college, buried my father before I could graduate, so he never got a chance to see what I had become as a doctor. And in the process, I married my fiance, and we wanted to have children. The problem was my wife was not having a cycle since the age of 16, so she was virtually unable to have a cycle, and she was concerned she was not going to be able to have children. So we began to seek medical attention to find out why my wife did not have a cycle. And after 3 doctors and about $3,000 later, we were given the diagnosis of idiopathic infertility. So if you don't know what the word idiopathic means in medicine, it means we don't know why. So they basically told me after $3,000 and a lot of medical testing that they couldn't tell me why my wife couldn't have children, which put my wife into a state of hysteria. And now I've got a hysterical wife that thinks I'm going to leave her because she can't give me children. So again, being pushed, I realized that there had to be a reason why she couldn't have her cycle. And believe it or not, while she was frantically pacing in front of me in our den, I'm looking at her body, and I realized that my wife, from all the years of gymnastics, my wife is a former gymnast on scholarship. Well, when you're a gymnast, if you've ever watched gymnastics, you see how those girls come off the balance beam. What do? They hyperextend their backs, and they put into this deep push. Well, what do you think is running through the lower part of your lumbar spine? The nerves that are running to your reproductive system. So my wife, and this all came to me in a flash as I'm just thinking about it, my wife, from all the years of gymnastics, crushed the nerves that were running through her lumbar spine, causing her not to be able to communicate with her nervous system to her brain to produce the hormones that were produced in ovulatory cycle, and that's why she wasn't having a cycle. So as I figured all this out in the spur of the moment, I explained this to my wife, and I was very excited, thinking, oh my gosh, I solved the problem. And of course, my wife, as many other wives, looked at me and said, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. This has nothing to do with my nerves. I can't have babies, and you think you're a super chiro man, and you're going to save me and the world, and that's not how it works. So I said, well, being that my wife's not going to listen to me, I should bring her to somebody that maybe she would listen to. So I brought her to one of my female chiropractic professors, who was a second-generation chiropractor from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And I took her in there and I said, Nadine, do not tell this doctor what's wrong with you. Let's see what she picks up on you. And sure enough, as soon as Nadine walked in and the doctor looked at her back, she asked my wife, are you having any reproductive problems? And my wife's mouth fell open because she realized that I may be right. And it turned out that Dr. DiGiacomo, who was my wife's chiropractor in Bay Ridge, put her on a program of care. And my wife, I got to give her credit. We lived in Hicksville, but she worked in Manhattan. 3 nights a week, she would take the Long Island Railroad to Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, get the R train into Bay Ridge, go to Dr. DiGiacomo's office, get back on the Long Island Railroad, and come out to Hicksville. That's commitment. 3 nights a week. But in 10 weeks, my wife was pregnant. She went from not having a cycle to pregnant in 10 weeks. Now, what this was another epiphany for me, because now I started thinking about women and women's health. And I said, how many women are told they can't have children because doctors are not doing a good job of checking them? So I began to think about that, and we're going back about 28 years ago now. I was a young intern, I wasn't even licensed yet, and I started researching women's hormones, women's health, and I started talking to a lot of women in the clinic where I was working in Levittown. I'm a New York Chiropractic College graduate, so I was in Levittown at the time. And I started seeing threads of the same information coming out of the ladies I was talking to. I kept hearing about emotional stress, family stress, stress with my children, stress with my husband, stress with my parents. It was the same thing over and over again. So what I began to do is I began to evaluate on multiple levels what was going on in the lives of women. And of course, you go through the physical. If you can't have a child, you look at hormones, you look for disease, you look for malfunction, and I did that. And I began to become an expert in women's hormones. I was doing saliva testing in 1997 when nobody was doing saliva testing. I was trying to explain it to the medical doctors in my community, and they were laughing at me. But I was curing infertility when they couldn't. Then I started doing functional medicine in the late 90s when it was still relatively new. And I was doing parasitology and blood work and stool and hormones. And I was doing that, and we were getting success with that. But there's something that wouldn't happen. Some people just didn't get better no matter what I did for them, and it would bother me. You know, I would get a perfectly healthy woman, and everything was fixed on the labs, but she couldn't get better. And I would say to her, what's going on in your life? I need to know what's going on with you. And I kept seeing the same thing coming up over and over again. What was going on was a lack of fulfillment on a deeper level than I was trained to look at. This went way beyond the physical body. This went into the spirit and the hopefulness of people. And I began talking to more of these ladies about, well, tell me why you're unfulfilled. What's happening in your life? And I kept hearing the same thing over and over again. I kept hearing, I'm exhausted. I'm unappreciated. I'm overworked. I give to everybody but myself. I never give anything to me, and by the end of the day, I'm so exhausted, I have no energy left for myself. And the word kept coming up to me, you sound like Mother Teresa. You sound like Mother Teresa. Now again, if you know the history of Mother Teresa was a phenomenal woman. And back in the 80s, when I was watching what she was doing, she actually was opening up AIDS centers in Manhattan in 1985. And I remember the day she opened that center. So this is a woman that was way ahead of her time, and she spent her entire life serving humanity. But there's something about Mother Teresa that you need to know. And I studied this as I studied theology over the last few years. And I'm going to read a quote that Mother Teresa made to one of her closest friends. And it shocked me when I read this because you would never think this would come out of Mother Teresa's mouth. And this is Mother Teresa's words. In a letter she wrote to one of her dearest friends, she said, "Where is my faith? Even deep down, right in there, is nothing but emptiness and darkness. My God, how painful is this unknown pain? I have no faith. I dare not utter the words and thoughts that crowd my heart and make me suffer untold agony." Now listen to me. How could a literal saint have those feelings if you're doing the work you're supposed to be doing? And I'll tell you why this happened to Mother Teresa. Because Mother Teresa made one mistake when she became Mother Teresa. She forgot about the person she was and became the icon that she became. You cannot bypass you to become an icon. So Mother Teresa took on the role to save the impoverished of India and the weak and the suffering, which we all applaud, to the point that she became canonized. The problem was that she was not selfish and she forgot about self. And I warn all of you when I talk to you about the Mother Teresa syndrome, that what's happening with many of you ladies is that you're not taking care of yourselves because you don't know how to be selfish anymore. So the problem that we have is that we are not selfish. Now, what does the word selfish means? It means maintenance of self. Selfish is not a bad word. Selfish is a good word. So the problem I have with most of the ladies I work with is they've forgotten how to be selfish. So one of the aspects that I have to teach you, as somebody who has studied both health and religious instruction. And you can see from the pictures, I've been ordained as a priest, and I'm also knighted. I'm a knight in the oldest order on planet Earth. My order is the Sacred Medical Order of the Knights Hospitaller. We are descended from the Knights Templar. We were the knights that saved Christians who were being persecuted by the Romans and the Jews for becoming Christians after they followed Christ. So I'm part of a sacred medical order. I have knowledge that goes back 1,000 years, and I know a lot of things about a lot of things that a lot of you don't know about, and I want to share that with you. So, with the amount of time I have left, I want to just share the fact that there are 5 major components to solving your health problems, which I discuss in my book, Happily Ever Now. That book is this book right here. That book is here at our table. We're at space 131 in the room. But the reason why you want to read this book is because there are 5 major components you have to solve your Happily Ever Now. Number 1, you must restore your health. The method that I use to restore physical health is something I do call nutrition response testing, where I do a physical examination to find deficiency anywhere in your body, find the nutrition that brings strength to you, put you on that nutrition, help you rebuild your system, and then from there the body heals over a period of time. That's the first thing. The second thing we have to do is conquer the Mother Teresa syndrome. You must learn how to put yourselves first, and then flow the light and love and energy to your families after. You don't bypass yourselves. You start with the beacon of light, and then your family benefits from the rest of it. Number 3, we must rebuild our bodies. Now, there are very, very many different ways to cure the body, even of cancer. And we have our cancer experts right here at this seminar that are right through that door when you go in that room. But is there more to it than just charging the body with anti-cancer nutrients? I believe there is. We have to also understand there are no rules to life, and that we have to live by our own rules, and we also have to set goals for our lives by actually writing a blueprint for healing. And in my book, I've created an actual line-by-line blueprint so you could rewrite your life, because many of you are putting your eggs in too many baskets and not putting any eggs in any baskets. You have to have complete eggs in all your right baskets for you, and there's a way to figure that out. So I encourage you to meet with me tomorrow. I'll do a more extended version of this workshop when we have a little bit more time. I thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to speaking to you all again in the future. And until then, good luck, God bless, and health to all of you. Thank you.